Me and my friends grew up in the Midwest, and if you know anything about the Midwest, there's not much fun to be had. Often, my friends and I would hang out in the park, drinking and maybe playing monkey chips if there was nothing else to do. One year, a nearby pool closed for some reason, left only as an empty building with a big hole where the water used to be. After a few months of no activity, we decided it was our new hangout spot. We hopped the fence with our drinks and plastic cups and sat in the empty pool. It was a Friday and quite late. We all just sat there talking about random things when we heard the fence rattling. We all looked at each other. My mind immediately went to the police, and I think everyone else did the same. It happened a few years ago, and none of us were legally old enough to drink. As we all panicked, waiting to be caught, we heard someone's foot hit the sidewalk, and then we heard what I assumed was one of the bathroom doors opening and closing. Who would be here right now alone? Apparently, my friends had the same thought. They both started whispering theories about who could be doing that if there was anyone. The park rangers didn't need to hop the fence. The only thing we agreed on was that we might need to leave before he decided to come out as slowly as possible. We all climbed the pool stairs and hopped the fence, then started walking back home. We were walking slowly, and I heard my friend swearing. Damn. Apparently he forgot his phone at the pool. We all stood there trying to figure out if we should go back. I agreed to go back with my friend, but no one else wanted to, and it might have been a smart idea on their part, but I wouldn't let my friend go alone. We walked back and tried to climb the fence as quietly as possible. He went down the stairs while I stayed there and watched behind the old plastic chairs, staring at the bathroom door the whole time. Everything seemed empty. I heard my friend climbing back up, but then I immediately saw a figure moving near the kids' pool area, and my heart raced when the crouched figure stood up and started running towards us. I helped my friend up the stairs, and we booked it. I wasn't the fastest, and my burden definitely increased. So I knew the only thing keeping me fast with my friend was pure adrenaline. I heard a bottle shatter behind me, and he started screaming, but I didn't understand what he was saying. The only word I could make out was, "Away from me." We started climbing the fence as fast as we could, but it was so hard to do while scared and tipsy. We made it to the top and jumped down, falling to our knees and having to get up. And that's when I saw what he was doing. It looked like ripped jeans and bare feet, with a yellow-stained shirt. He was an old man with a disgusting beard, and his whole face looked gray. I didn't see the rest, but I didn't want to, so I got up and started running again. I could hear him screaming behind us never to come back. It was scary at the time, but now that I'm older and look back, I laugh with my friends about it. I feel sorry for the guy, though. He was clearly homeless, and not everything in my head might have thought we were out to get him or something unnecessary. We never went back to that pool. I just moved to a new house outside the town where I live. I wanted to get away from the chaotic city lifestyle and into a more peaceful and quiet area. The house I got is a rental property owned by a decent man. It's perfect. The inside is spacious and modern, and the outside has lots of land filled with trees that block the view of the street and neighboring houses, making me feel like I'm alone. In the middle of nowhere, which actually feels good to me. I've been there for almost a week, though I hardly had a chance to go out because of working all day. But on Friday evening, I got off work early, so I decided to walk around the trees on the side of the house. It was pleasant and peaceful, but it was just an ordinary forest. I guess after being out there for a few minutes, though, I saw something in the far distance behind the trees. It looked like some kind of building, but the trees blocked the view. so I couldn't tell exactly what it was, although I could tell that it clearly wasn't a house, at least not one that had been recently inhabited. I wasn't particularly interested in exploring, and it was getting late, so I left it and went inside to sleep a few hours later, although I found myself thinking about it again and eventually contacted the owner and asked him about it. I was just curious, and I felt there was no harm in asking. I forgot about his message after a while and continued with my routine until I went to bed around 9 o'clock. I went to work the next morning and returned at 4 o'clock. That's when I noticed I still hadn't received a response from the owner. I thought maybe he didn't know what I was talking about, which then made me doubt myself. I really couldn't see it clearly, so maybe I was mistaken that it was something that actually wasn't. I went back outside and walked further into the woods towards where I saw it. After I saw it again, I got closer. I now know it was definitely real. So strange that the owner didn't see it. I knew the house was here since he told me he'd been living on the property for 4 years, and it stood right next to it. Although I could tell it was actually an old abandoned house, the house was small but seemed to have 2 floors. I walked around it just to check it out. I really didn't like that thing being in my backyard, and no one told me about it. I knew the thing might not be anything special, but it was really creepy. Behind it was an old rusty door that was half open and barely hanging on its hinges. I didn't want to go inside this place, but I knew I couldn't stand the thought of knowing this abandoned house was in my backyard while not knowing what was inside. After seeing all I could from the outside, I walked up to the broken back porch and knocked on the wall to make sure there was nothing inside. Then I slowly opened the door and stepped in. The first thing that crossed my mind was the disgusting smell, maybe the worst I've ever smelled. I stepped further, hoping to see a dead animal somewhere, but it was mostly empty, except for an old table in the middle of the dark room, because there were only 2 windows, both covered with boards. There was another room downstairs that was also empty, but there was a staircase leading to it. But the problem was, it was pitch black at the top of the stairs just thinking about it, and I hadn't seen any windows on the top floor from the outside going up there. It was too much for me, but at least I wanted to make sure it looked normal. So I took out my phone and illuminated the stairs, but there was nothing. I mean, nothing on the top floor. It was just a wooden wall at the top of the stairs. I was in a state of confusion and strange shock just by seeing the weird structure. But then I heard something. Someone else breathing very softly behind the wall at the top of the stairs. I backed away slowly, hoping I hadn't noticed it. But as I started moving, I heard footsteps on the top floor walking across the floor. They sounded like they were also trying to be quiet, although I might have been halfway there before I couldn't handle the intensity of the situation, and I ran out of the house and back to my house. I locked all the doors and stood near the window checking if anyone was following me. I really wasn't sure what to do. I didn't even know if the house actually belonged to me or not, and on top of that, it wasn't mine because I rented it. The owner still hadn't responded, which made me feel worse about everything. Unfortunately, because of overthinking, I didn't finally force myself to call the police until an hour later. They weren't sure about the place or whose it was, but when they searched it, the place was empty. I asked them about the wall at the top of the stairs, but I was even more frightened to hear that they didn't know what I was talking about. They said they went upstairs, and there was just another empty room, no wall blocking it or anything. I became more and more worried, but I felt they weren't taking this case very seriously either. Did they care about my concerns? So I let them leave. The worst part, and perhaps even the weirdest of all, was in the following week after the homeowner continued not to respond even to my normal payment inquiries. After over a month of no response, I sent them one last message saying that I was breaking the lease and would move out. I never received any texts or emails from them again, even though I terminated the lease I signed 11 months earlier when nothing actually happened. I still consider my experience in that house to be one of the most terrifying and unusual experiences in my life. My friend Matt and I live in Pennsylvania. We're technically neighbors, although he lives almost a mile away. Both of our houses have a lot of land, mostly filled with empty wooded areas leading to the hills. Anyway, Matt was hanging out at my house. One night, he mentioned that he found something interesting when he was in the woods behind his house. He said it was a tunnel, with old wooden beams holding it together. Matt said he didn't want to explore it alone because it gave him a bad feeling. I asked how far it was, and he said it might be a mile's walk behind his house without any trails or anything leading to it. Honestly, it sounded intriguing to me, so I agreed to check it out with him. I grabbed my small backpack from the closet and packed a flashlight into a water bottle. Then we drove to his house and started walking. It was only 5 p.m., so we had a couple of hours of daylight left, which we thought would be fine. We walked for 20 minutes before we reached it. The structure was exactly as he described it, a simple tunnel with wooden pillars holding the entrance. There was nothing outside or anything lying around it. Matt took the flashlight out of my bag and shone it into the tunnel as we approached the entrance. It seemed like the path was straight for a while with more beams on its sides. I thought it was an abandoned mine, but the mine was so bare and empty that it made me unsure. I had seen old mines before, but there were usually items lying around old wooden crates or even short rails leading to them. Matt led the way in, and I followed. It felt cold and eerie with each step echoing in the tunnel. After a minute of walking, we reached the tunnel's entrance and found another path to the left on the wall with some writings on it. It was an arrow pointing back to where we came from, and there was the word exit written below it. We continued our journey, but just a few steps down, we saw a lot of trash piled up next to a trash bag, food wrappers, and water bottles, most of it. We already knew someone had been here before seeing the writings, but the trash didn't look dirty. Matt held the flashlight near the chip bag on the ground and cleaned it. Not even a speck of dust on it, with the dust basically falling from the ceiling. It scared us. Someone must have been here in the past few hours, except there was something strange happening with all the trash. I think Matt saw the concern on my face because he said it seemed like some teens were hanging out here earlier. He started walking again past the trash when Matt's footsteps receded. I felt a strange feeling, and I looked back from where we came from to make sure no one was watching. Us. But then I heard Matt's footsteps suddenly stop. I turned around and saw him walking along the tunnel facing what looked like another corridor. But he stood still, so my voice echoed through the tunnel, but he didn't respond the way he stood so still and looked clearly. At something like he was surprised I apologized, he whispered back and quickly walked towards me, pointing forward for me to follow. When we turned into the main tunnel, a loud bang echoed towards us. We ran until we finally managed to get out, then ran all the way to Matt's house while watching behind us to make sure no one was following when we got inside. I looked at Matt, and he looked terrified. What happened? Was someone in there? I asked, still not knowing what he saw. He looked at me, then looked back down. He said there was a naked man sitting just a few meters below the next tunnel. Apparently he was holding something that looked like a squirrel or rabbit, in a way that to Matt seemed like he was trying to gut it and eat it. Hearing this, I almost wanted to break it, joking or saying that I knew he was just teasing me, but there was something in the way he told me that I knew he wasn't lying. I don't know. It would be quite disturbing to see something like that in a place like that. Never went back. And a few days later, Matt seemed back to normal. Clearly, I never saw the man, so it could all be some made-up weird story. But if you looked at Matt's condition after we came out of that tunnel, you'd believe him too with people living in the wilderness like that, although no one knows what. They would do if they saw you, especially if you happened to enter their house like we did.